Good afternoon and welcome to Midday Prime. In the next 1 hour, we bring you all the stories and updates from India and from around the world. We'll also update you about the happenings in the world of business and sports, and we'll get you some interesting stories that are making the headlines. I'm Amritpal Singh. Let's begin with the headlines we are tracking at this hour, the big news of the hour. At the Delhi Regional Security Dialogue on Afghanistan, National Security Advisor Ajit Doval says Afghanistan matters have implications for all. Calls for a united approach by all countries. All the participating NSAs later call on Prime Minister Modi. President Ramnath Kovind confers the honorary rank of General of the Indian Army on Army Chief of Nepal, General Prabhu Ram Sharma, in a special ceremony at the Rashtrapati Bhavan. General Narwane, the Army Chief, was conferred the same honor by Nepal in 2020. Heavy rains continue to lash Tamil Nadu. IMD issues red alert for several districts till the 11th of November. Government announces holidays for 26 districts. 20 teams of the NDRF deployed in Tamil Nadu and Andhra Pradesh. And in international news, trouble for former U.S. President Donald Trump. U.S. judge allows congressional committee probing the Capitol Hill violence to examine some White House records. Trump supporters had stormed the Capitol building on the 6th of January ahead of President Joe Biden's election victory. Extreme cold wave sweeps across many parts of China, bringing heavy snowfall and plunging temperatures. China Meteorological Administration warns of negative impact on the country's energy supply, agriculture and transport infrastructure. ICC Men's T20 WorldCup Semifinal, England to face New Zealand in the first semi-final match at the Zayed Cricket Stadium in Abu Dhabi today. The clash is being seen as a rerun of 2019 World Cup finals. Let's now begin with the big news. Prime Minister Narendra Modi met the NSAs of the National Security Advisors of 7 countries, including 5 Central Asian countries and Russia and Iran. The National Security Advisors from all the 7 countries, the 8th one being, of course, India, who's chairing and hosting this dialogue, met Prime Minister Narendra Modi today after participating in the Regional Security Dialogue on Afghanistan in Delhi. This meeting took a little while back at the Prime Minister's office when the visiting NSAs of these countries called on the Prime Minister after participating in the ongoing Delhi Regional Security Dialogue. The Delhi Regional Security Dialogue on Afghanistan began in the national capital this morning. National Security Advisors or the secretaries of the Security Councils of Iran, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Russia, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan are taking part in the dialogue. National Security Advisor Ajit Doval is chairing the Regional Security Dialogue as India is the host. This dialogue focuses primarily in Afghanistan. The meeting is being attended by the NSA's counterparts, as I said, from these 5 Central Asian countries who share land borders with Afghanistan, along with, of course, the regional players of Russia, Iran and India. In his opening remarks, Ajit Doval stressed on close consultations, greater cooperation and interaction among regional countries. He hoped that the deliberations will be productive, useful and will contribute to help the people of Afghanistan.
We all have been keenly watching the developments in that country. These have important implications not only for the people of Afghanistan but also for its neighbors and the region. This is the time for close consultations amongst us, greater cooperation and interaction and coordination among the regional countries. I am confident that our deliberations will be productive, useful and will contribute to help the people of Afghanistan and enhance our collective security.
So what is happening in Afghanistan has implications on our collective security. We should have close consultations on that and adopt a collective approach. Well, that was a sentiment that was echoed by the other NSAs. And Nasrullah Mahmoud Zoda, the Secretary of the Security Council of Tajikistan, said that the current situation in Afghanistan creates the extra risk and possibilities of drug trafficking and terrorism. The situation in Tajik-Afghan borders remains complicated.
You can understand why we are concerned as we have a long border with Afghanistan, and of course the current situation creates extra risk and possibility for growth of drug trafficking, terrorism and criminality. The situation on the Tajik and Afghan border remains complicated, and we as the neighboring country are ready to participate in all programs that can help to the people of Afghanistan.
And Rear Admiral Ali Shamkhani, the Secretary of the National Security Council of Iran, raised the issue of migration of refugees in Afghanistan. He stressed on finding a solution with the formation of an inclusive government and participation of all ethnic groups.
Basically, in Afghanistan, you have just crisis, the crisis of migration and refugees. And the solution comes only through the formation of an inclusive government with the participation of all ethnic groups, and therefore we hope we would be able to determine who would be the fourth, where and who would host the fourth round, and also we would be able to come up with ideas with what mechanism we can resolve the issues in Afghanistan.
Russia's National Security Advisor Nikolai Patrushev, participating in the Delhi dialogue, said that such multilateral meetings help in discussing issues linked to development situation in Afghanistan, counter challenges, threats emanating from that country, and establishing long-lasting peace in Afghanistan.
All these events are surely important. We are also convinced that such dialogue mechanisms should not duplicate the work of each other, but rather complement each other. From my point of view, I would presume that the Moscow format of consultations on Afghanistan retains its important potential, because it lets us coordinate efforts to help Afghanistan to settle the Afghani issue, considering the new political environment in that country.
So what is this Delhi dialogue, and why is India hosting that? What's on the agenda? What could be the possible outcomes? Who all are participating? We'll talk about that visually, if I can show that. Well, this is it's called the Delhi Regional Security Dialogue on Afghanistan, which New Delhi is hosting. This dialogue is being chaired by National Security Advisor Ajit Doval. The dialogue is discussing the ongoing situation in Afghanistan. That's what this dialogue has been called for. As I said, Ajit Doval, the National Security Advisor, is chairing this dialogue because India is hosting this dialogue. The other NSAs that are participating are of 7 other countries, 5 Central Asian countries, and Russia and Iran. If you look at the countries who are participating, it's Iran, Russia, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan and Tajikistan. They are participating in this dialogue. Pakistan and China were invited, but they are not participating. Pakistan, for obvious reasons. China has said it's got scheduling issues, but will be in touch with New Delhi on the matter. Iran had earlier hosted this dialogue twice, once in 2018 and again in 2019, but now the focus has changed given that the situation has completely reversed after the takeover of the Taliban. Now what's on the agenda? Adopting common approach in confronting the threat of terrorism emanating from the Afghan soil. That is the biggest concern of the international community, more so of the regional players, because the region is who gets affected first. And radicalization, drug trafficking and illicit arms flow. These are concerns that are common to all the participating countries. Cross-border movement of people. There is a bad situation there, jobs, hunger, mass starvation, people are migrating, so cross-border movement of people is an important agenda in this conference. Threat emanating from the military weapons left behind by US troops and NATO troops, or the ISAF troops who were there before they moved out. Now they left behind tanks, choppers, weapons, small arms, etc. So now that falling into the hands of terrorists, and terrorists using that for their own purposes, is a matter of concern. Of course, the humanitarian catastrophe, not crisis, catastrophe, and the question of assistance and aid distribution to Taliban, because there is this problem of Taliban not being inclusive. So how do you trust Taliban doing a fair and equitable distribution of that aid if the world were to defreeze the money there and the aid flowing into Afghanistan? So that is a point of common concern and a point which is bothering the whole world, but more so the regional leaders. I'm joined to talk more on that by Professor Harshvardhan Pant. He's a distinguished fellow at the ORF. Professor Pant, thank you very much for joining us. Let me begin by asking you a straight, simple question. Why is New Delhi hosting this dialogue?
Well, New Delhi has very important stakes in what happens in Afghanistan, and the situation has really deteriorated. Those who were talking 2 months back that this is going to usher in a new era, that the Taliban have changed, this is going to be a new government, where the focus will be on governance. Nothing of that kind has materialized. So while India has been patiently listening to others and patiently trying to ascertain what needs to be done, I think time has now come for India to step up to the plate and take leadership in its own hands, because ultimately, America can move on, the West can wait and watch. But I think for India, it's a regional concern, it's an immediate concern, and India really cannot wait any longer for others to define the agenda. So it is important that India is there, India defines the agenda, and India takes the initiative forward, bringing together a set of stakeholders that are convergent with India on this. And as you pointed out in your remarks, even Pakistan and China were invited because India recognizes that they are important stakeholders. But it's their agenda that I think is not in sync with what others in the region may be facing. And so we are where we are, and India is definitely showing that it is resolved in taking this initiative forward, and it will take all the necessary steps that are needed to ensure that ordinary Afghans are safe and secure, and the regional environment remains conducive to a stabilization of Afghanistan, which is the need of the era.
Well, the Indians have traditionally been friends of the Afghans. When Afghans are going through this catastrophe of mass starvation, the UNICEF, the UN bodies have said that half of their population could be starving. There are deaths happening under 5. They are at the risk of massive mass migration. At this point in time, what could these countries collectively agree upon for their future strategy to improve the situation?
Indeed, as you pointed out, India has always been standing with the Afghans in their very difficult hours. If you go back to the last 2 decades, India was one of the few countries that tried to build capacity in Afghanistan, that tried to help the ordinary Afghans, which very few countries were willing to do. And I think today it's heartbreaking to see what our Afghan friends are going through, because ultimately the Taliban has proven to be incompetent. They have proven to be incompetent at governance. They have, the idea that they will win a war, by violence and then start governing has come to naught. And clearly, I think the challenge now for India, along with other countries, is to ensure that the situation for ordinary Afghans does not deteriorate even further than it has already happened so far. So I think the question now is, how can aid be disbursed to those who are in most need of this at a time when winters are approaching, when hunger and malnutrition are at an all-time high, and when security situation is also deteriorating rapidly. So I think unless the international community and in particular the regional states define the terms of engagement on the aid question, it will be very difficult to move forward individually. Bilaterally, countries can't do much. It is only through regional cooperation and regional coordination can aid be disbursed in a manner that it is not exploited by the Taliban, that it is given to those who are in need of who are in the most need, and all the countries can pool and chip in their resources so that the catastrophe that is about to commence in Afghanistan can be averted.
Professor Pant, the catastrophe is already unfolding. I mean, there is no firewood, there is no food on the shelves, there is no bread there are no medicines, the health infrastructure has collapsed, and these countries realize that. That's perhaps the reason why the security czars are meeting in Delhi. But the question is, you know, it is a meeting of the security czars. Is the concern of terrorism emanating out of there, or the regional security situation that would be weighing more on their minds, or the humanitarian catastrophe evolving there?
Amrit, in some ways, the two are interlinked, because security today is not simply a question of war and peace. It's not simply a question of factions fighting with each other through violence, through the use of violence. It is also a question of, if economic conditions do not improve substantively, then not only is there going to be human loss of life, but there will be consequences like mass migration, like people joining terror groups, like people becoming radicalized. And that is something that all neighboring countries want to avert, because essentially the most pressing challenge from Afghanistan today is to prevent Afghanistan from becoming a safe haven for extremists and radicals, and to ensure that extremism and terrorism does not extend into the boundaries of other states. And to ensure that that does not happen, you have to intervene at the grassroots in Afghanistan to make sure that the most deprived, that the hungriest, that the most vulnerable are protected. They feel that the world is coming to their aid, and that they have something to look forward to. If situation becomes very pessimistic for them, then the logic of terrorism takes over, the logic of radicalization takes over. So I think critically for national security advisors across the region, for them the security situation is volatile, but the radicalization and extremism question cannot be entirely delinked from the question of what happens to the human population in Afghanistan.
Of course, it feeds on hunger, radicalization, exporting of the ideology of radicalization, and the situation there. You're right, absolutely right. But Professor Pant, you argue that intervention at the grassroots, seeing that aid reaches the ordinary Afghans, the people who are most vulnerable, is of critical importance. How do you do that? By bypassing the Taliban. They run the country, after all. You may not like them. None of the participating countries have given diplomatic recognition. So understandably, the Taliban has not been invited. But isn't this a paradox that they are discussing Afghanistan without the involvement of the rulers of Afghanistan, whether legitimate or not?
Yes, indeed, it is paradoxical, Amrit, but it is a situation that Taliban have created for themselves. You remember when they seized power at the very beginning, there was an expectancy that somehow Taliban would evolve into a governing organization, but that has not happened. The way they have targeted minorities, the way they have targeted political opposition, the way they have destroyed institutions and not created anything in return. I think that has sent out a very, very difficult message to the world that this is, the differentiation between Taliban 1.2 and Taliban 2.2 does not exist. And so, how do you engage with them has been an essential question. India, of course, has never said that we are not willing to engage with Taliban. India has always said that unless certain conditions are met.
In fact, our diplomat in Qatar met with the Talibanis.
Sorry, Amrit, you were saying
I said, in fact, on the other hand, our diplomat in Qatar, our ambassador in Qatar, met with the Taliban to see how they can nudge towards forming a more inclusive government, which is more inclusive and representative, and takes care of their ethnic minorities, their women, etc.
Indeed, And I think, if you go back and if you see certain countries like Russia, for example, why is it that Russia today is looking at Afghanistan more through the prism of India than it was doing, say, 2 months back? Because I think that the arguments that India has presented throughout are, they look more credible today than the original optimism that was there in certain world capitals, in August and September. So I think the challenge now is that certainly grassroots intervention is needed. Aid needs to be dispersed, and people, ordinary Afghans, have to be protected. And the international community and regional stakeholders have to come together to do that.
Okay.
But clearly, the leverage that the international community and regional stakeholders have is also something that has to be leveraged judiciously. That we cannot allow Taliban to get away with whatever they are doing in the name of a human catastrophe.
Absolutely.
Certainly, India will and other stakeholders want to help ordinary Afghans, but the onus in a certain way is on Taliban to ensure that they come out and they categorically do certain things that are needed. Otherwise, international community will have to bypass them and find multilateral organizations to figure out a response to this crisis. And I think that's what being discussed today and in several other meetings that will happen over the course of the next few months.
Professor Pant, my producer tells me I'm completely out of time. So very, very succinctly, does Kabul care? Would they be watching what happens because they're foreign, while the neighbors of Afghanistan have converged in New Delhi? The foreign minister of Afghanistan is in Islamabad to see how things can move forward.
Yes, I think they will have to care, partly because while they may think that Islamabad and Rawalpindi will take the chestnuts out of their fire, but I don't think the kind of aid and support that is needed can come from Islamabad and Rawalpindi. I think for them, for Afghanistan, for Taliban today, it is important that international community comes to their aid if they have to have any semblance of stability in Afghanistan. Otherwise, it's a question of Afghanistan falling apart and Taliban taking the ownership of that, of the broken Afghanistan. So I think they have to recognize the fact that so many countries have converged in Delhi, and the message is going out from Delhi that stakeholders in the region want certain conditions to be met, and they are willing to help Afghanistan. It's not about, because I think at the end of the day, as we have been discussing, ordinary Afghans are at the focal point of this agenda.
Absolutely. So this is what the Taliban needs to make up of their mind. Do they want to be a ragtag militia being run by the Quetta Shura or the military bosses in Pindi across the Durand line, or do they want to be a responsible, inclusive government of all Afghans, of what they call the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan? Well, Professor Pant, we'll have to leave it there. Many thanks for joining and sharing your insights with us. Thank you. And moving on now, time to go on to our developing story. Moving down south to Tamil Nadu now, a red alert has been issued for 20 districts across the state of Tamil Nadu, including Chennai, after a well-marked low pressure area of the Bay of Bengal is expected to intensify into a depression and move west-northwest and reach Tamil Nadu's northern coast by tomorrow morning. Heavy to very heavy rainfall is forecast over coastal and adjoining parts of the state as well as in Puducherry. Meanwhile, ahead of the second round of showers, boats, earth movers and giant motor pumps have been deployed in Chennai to aid rescue efforts and to drain floodwaters. The Tamil Nadu government has also set up 434 towers to alert authorities to floods and other emergencies, and is working with telecom networks to ensure that 50 mobile cellular phone towers are ready for use. Meanwhile, the civic authorities in Chennai have scotched fears of a deluge as seen in 2015, saying that water is being released gradually from the city's reservoirs and there would be no sudden discharge that could lead to flooding in the metro like it did in 2015. Tamil Nadu has been hit by heavy rain since Sunday, having received 46% excess rain so far as compared to the norm. At least 5 people have died in rain-related events. Over 530 houses or huts have been damaged or washed away, and more than 1,700 people are presently in relief camps. Chennai, though, received just 1.4 centimeter till 5:30 a.m. this morning. Heavy rainfall, however, hit the Delta districts overnight, including Nagapattinam and Tamil Nadu and Karaikal in Puducherry. As per IMD updates, well-marked low-pressure area over central parts of South Bay of Bengal is present. It's likely to concentrate into a depression over southwest Bay of Bengal during the next 12 hours. Move west-northwestwards and reach the North Tamil Nadu coast by early morning of 11th of November. Thereafter, it's likely to continue to move westward, northwestwards and cross North Tamil Nadu and adjoining South Andhra Pradesh coast between Karaikal and Sriharikota around Kodalur by the evening of 11th November. And now moving on to our National Prime segment. President Ramnath Kovind today conferred the honorary rank of General of the Indian Army to Nepal Army Chief General Prabhu Ram Sharma. Union Defence Minister Rajnath Singh, Indian Army Chief M.M. Naravane, Air Chief Marshal and the Chief of Air Staff V.R. Chaudhary and the Naval Chief Admiral Karambir Singh. Besides, the CDS General Bipin Rawat attended the ceremony. General Naravane, the Indian Army Chief, was awarded such a similar honour last year. And General Sharma is an alumnus of the National Defence College in India, also holds an MPhil degree in Defence and Strategic Studies from the University of Madras. He is currently on a 4-day visit to India. Earlier last year, Indian Army Chief General M.M. Naravane was to conferred the honorary rank of the General of the Nepali Army by the President of Nepal, Bidya Devi Bhandari. And the tradition of conferring the rank of honorary general to the chiefs of army of Nepal and India started in 1950, with General K.M. Karyappa being the first Indian Army chief to be decorated with the highest army title of Nepal. It reflects the continued bonhomie between Indian and Nepalese armies and the deep trust and understanding between the two nations. In Rajasthan, 8 persons died, several were injured after a collision between a passenger bus and a truck near Pachpadra in Barmer district. The incident took place on the Barmer-Jodhpur highway today. Injured persons are being treated at a government hospital. The police and district administration officials are on the spot. Following the incident, both the bus and the truck caught fire, for which 3 fire tenders were rushed. The fire has been currently brought under control. Soon after the accident, the Chief Minister of Rajasthan, Ashok Gehlot, directed the district collector regarding the relief and rescue operations and asked him to ensure best medical treatment for the injured. Also, Prime Minister Modi has expressed grief over the loss of lives due to the bus tanker collision at the Barmer-Jodhpur highway. He also extended condolences to the bereaved families and prayed for quick recovery of the injured. That's a tweet that the Prime Minister put out. He announced an ex gratia of 2 lakh rupees each from the Prime Minister's National Relief Fund, which will be given to the next of kin of those who lost their lives due to the accident. The injured would be given 50,000 rupees each. Well, the nation is celebrating the 3rd day of Chhath Puja today with full fervour. Women on this day take a dip in the water to offer prayers to the sun god. The women will offer aragya to the sun god today in the evening during the 4-day long festival. The whole nation is in the festive mood. However, in the national capital, the festivities have been marred by the rise in pollution levels in river Yamuna, often considered holy by the Hindu devotees. Clouds of white toxic foam can be seen floating in the river as devotees take bath in the water to fulfill the ritual. As the situation deteriorates, cleaning of the river ahead of the festival is underway. Boats have been deployed to remove toxic foam from the river. Not only that, barricades have been placed in the Yamuna to stop toxic foam from floating towards Kalindi Kunj Ghat in Delhi to keep the devotees from taking dip in the toxic water. The rise in contamination in river Yamuna is mostly attributed to illegal dumping of industrial waste and untreated sewage water. And taking cognizance of the situation, the authorities have said that people are not allowed to celebrate Chhath at Yamuna Ghats. The pollution levels were high today, as well as seeing which the police came and made the devotees who came there for puja, they escorted them out of the ghat. The police also stopped puja functions as water became polluted badly today. Well, for now, an update on the nationwide COVID-19 vaccination drive. The COVID-19 vaccination coverage has crossed the 109 crore milestone. It's crossed 109 crore. Over 109 crore, 63 lakh vaccine doses have been administered across the country so far. More than 52.69 lakh vaccine doses have been administered in the last 24 hours alone. And in Midday Prime, it's time for news and updates from the world of business. And for that, my colleague Tanvi Taneja joins us for more. Tanvi, tell us how the markets are doing and what else is making news in the world of business.
Right, Amrit. Lots happening at the domestic stock markets today. The domestic stock markets have raised their losses and are trading flat in afternoon deals on Wednesday. So the Sensex at the BSE had advanced 48 points, 0.1% to 60,481 in afternoon deals a short while ago. The Nifty at the National Stock Exchange had edged up 6 points to 18,049. In the broader market, the BSE mid-cap index had lost 0.2%, but the small-cap index had gained 0.4%. The top index losers are Tata Steel, Hindalco, IndusInd Bank and JSW Steel, with losses of between 2.5% and 3%. The top index gainers on the BSE so far are Mahindra & Mahindra, UPL, Britannia and Bharti Airtel, with gains of between 1.6% and 3.2%. Shares of beauty startup cosmetics retailer Nykaa made a sparkling debut on the stock exchanges on Wednesday. Shares of FSN e-commerce ventures, the parent company of Nykaa, listed at 2018 rupees a share on the National Stock Exchange, which is a hefty premium of 79% compared to its issue price of 1,125 rupees per share. On the BSE, Nykaa shares opened at 2,001 rupees, up 78% compared to its issue price. Nykaa shares surged as much as 99% intraday to hit a high of 2,235 rupees on the NSE. Nykaa's share sale via an initial public offering IPO to raise 5,352 crore rupees from the stock markets, which closed on November 1st, had been subscribed as much as 82 times. Nykaa's listing has made its 58-year-old CEO and founder Falguni Nayar India's richest self-made woman billionaire. Meanwhile, fintech firm Paytm's initial public offering of up to 183 billion rupees was subscribed fully by this noon today, Wednesday being the last day of its issue period. The 18,300 crore rupee IPO had been subscribed 1.08 times on Wednesday, receiving bids for 5.24 crore equity shares against offer size of 4.83 crore shares. So the portion set aside for retail investors was subscribed 1.43 times, while the reserved portion of non-institutional investors was subscribed 7%, and qualified institutional buyers have put in bids 1.47 times the portion set aside for them. So quite a day for Paytm. Elsewhere in Asia, key share markets had mostly lost ground on Wednesday amid fresh concerns about the solvency of China's property developers, while surging oil prices added to worries that a hot US inflation reading could renew pressure on policymakers to lift interest rates. So MSCI's broadest index of Asia-Pacific shares outside Japan dropped 0.6%. China's Shanghai Composite Index had slipped 0.4%. Japan's Nikkei 225 index had declined 0.6%. And South Korea's Kospi index had lost 1.1%. But Hong Kong's Hang Seng index was up 0.6%. Meanwhile, the latest US inflation figures are expected to show consumer prices galloping ahead at 5.8% year on year, the fastest pace in a generation. Even dovish US Federal Reserve or central bank officials are concerned about high inflation. An analyst said that inflation higher for longer than expected is becoming the market's considered opinion right now, and the inflation concerns are likely to be reinforced by the latest data. Over on Wall Street, stocks closed lower on Tuesday, ending a multi-day rally of consecutive record closing highs as profit-taking and worries over ongoing inflation fueled a broad sell-off. All three major US stock indices lost ground, marking the end of an 8-session streak of all-time closing highs set by the S&P 500 and the Nasdaq. So the S&P 500 lost 0.4%, the Nasdaq Composite lost 0.6%, and the Dow Jones Industrial Average fell 0.3%. So with that, it's a wrap on our Business Prime segment. For other news coming in, let's go back to Amrit. Amrit, over to you.
Thank you, Tanvi, for that. And now let's take a look at what else is making news across the globe. India has retained its top 10 spot in the best performing countries for the third year in a row in the Global Climate Performance Index released by German Watch on the sidelines of COP26 on Tuesday. The top three places in the overall ranking remain empty once again, as no country performed well enough in the index categories to achieve an overall very high rating in CCPI. Denmark was placed fourth and is the highest ranked country in CCPI 2022. Thus, India is at the 10th slot and the 7th best performing country. India maintained its 10th position despite the pandemic-hit operational difficulties, which saw some regulatory flexibility to put the country's economy back on track. India's low per capita emissions, climate policy and renewable energy focus have lent weight to its performance. China is the current biggest polluter and figured at 37th position, falling down 3 spots since last year. While the second highest current emitter, the United States, was at the 55th spot in the CCPI 2022. The European Union has pledged a package of $115 million to the United Nations Adaptation Fund. The UN Adaptation Fund offers finance to developing countries vulnerable to the impact of climate change. The additional contribution from the EU budget is by far the biggest pledge for the Adaptation Fund made by donors at COP26.
This is about addressing the effects of the crisis that we are already in. Today is the day we need to act on adaptation as well. Financing adaptation is critical. We all repeated that mantra endlessly, but the rhetoric, sadly, is not followed by action. We all need to get cracking, and we all need to do it now. That is why the European Commission will contribute 100 million euros to the Adaptation Fund, because those who need resources for adaptation also need to have predictability and clarity about its delivery.
And in international news, a U.S. government agency on Tuesday said that 13 senior members of former U.S. President Donald Trump's administration violated a law that limits political campaigning by government employees, faulting them for creating a taxpayer-funded campaign apparatus within the White House. In a 65-page report, the U.S. Office of Special Counsel identified instances in which Trump advisors, including Jared Kushner and Kellyanne Conway used their official authority to promote Trump's 2020 presidential election campaign. OSC said that discipline was no longer possible because the Trump administration officials have left office, but it said it was issuing the report to highlight enforcement challenges and to deter future violations. OSC is an independent federal watchdog within the United States government that investigates violations of the Hatch Act, a law limiting political participation and speech of federal employees. The report was the culmination of an investigation that began while Trump was in office following his decision to hold the 2020 Republican National Convention at the White House. Meanwhile, a federal judge ruled on Tuesday that the U.S. House Representatives Committee investigating the deadly January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol can access former President Donald Trump's White House records. This is being seen as a win for the congressional investigators. U.S. District Judge Tanya Chutkan in the District of Columbia rejected the argument by Trump's lawyers that telephone records, visitor logs and other White House documents should be hidden from the committee. Trump had argued that the materials requested by the House committee were covered by a legal doctrine known as the executive privilege that protects the confidentiality of some White House communications. He requested an injunction blocking the National Archives, a federal agency that holds his White House records, from complying with the committee's document requests. The committee has said it needs the requested materials to understand the role that Trump may have played in fomenting the riot. And Trump supporters stormed the Capitol in a failed bid to prevent Congress from formally certifying now President Joe Biden's election victory then. Biden, a Democrat, took office on January 20th, and around that time 700 people had gathered. They faced criminal charges stemming from the riot. A cold wave swept across many parts of China over the last few days, bringing heavy snowfall and plunging temperatures. Strong winds and heavy snow have hit several parts of northern China early this year, damaging houses and blocking roads. The highest warning signal has been issued in multiple cities as snowfall broke local records in various areas. Large parts of the country, including Beijing, Tianjin, Hebei and Inner Mongolia, experienced this winter's first significant snowfall and rain on Saturday, according to China Meteorological Administration. As per reports, Inner Mongolia's autonomous region in the north has received 50 centimeters deep snowfall. The CMA has warned that the cold snap and snowfall could have a negative impact on the country's energy supply, agriculture and transport infrastructure. Experts have also warned that extreme weather is likely to worsen the situation, as several regions have already been grappling with surging fuel prices and power shortages in the recent months. The 2022 Winter Olympics will take place a few months now from Beijing, a city which is generally considered having dry weather with less snow and rain in early winters. But an incoming storm could bring a potentially significant snowfall to the region with less than 100 days to go for the Games. And now let's take a look at the updates from COVID-19 from across the world. Well, the world recorded more than 25 crore 15 lakh cases of COVID-19. The number of recoveries from COVID-19 worldwide has crossed 22 crore 77 lakh, while the virus has claimed over 50 lakh 79,000 lives so far. The US continues to remain the worst affected with COVID-19, where a number of cases stand above 4 crore 75 lakh. The country has lost more than 7 lakh 78,000 lives to the disease so far. The United Nations said at least 16 of its staff and dependents in Ethiopia have been detained in the capital, Addis Ababa. UN spokesperson said that it's working closely in the war-torn country to get its staff released immediately. The state-appointed Ethiopian Human Rights Commission said it had received many reports of arrests of Tigrayans in the capital, including elders and mothers with children. However, the police have denied making ethnically motivated arrests, saying they are only targeting supporters of the religious Tigrayan forces fighting the central government. Meanwhile, fighters of the Tigray People's Liberation Front and the Oromo Liberation Army were seen in the town of Kamis, that is situated about 200 miles away from the Ethiopian capital. Ethiopia had announced a state of emergency for 6 months on November 2nd as Tigrayan forces threatened to capture Addis Ababa. Conflict unfolded in Ethiopia in November 2020 when forces loyal to the TPLF seized military bases in Tigray. In response, Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed sent troops to the northern region. Thousands have been killed and more than 2 million have fled their homes in fighting since then. And now it's time for stories from the world of sports. And my colleague Deepika joins us for more on that. Deepika, tell us what's making news in the world of sports.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, Smriti joins us. I'm sorry, Smriti, I didn't take a look. Smriti joins us. Welcome, Smriti. Tell us what's making news.
Thank you, Amrit. Good afternoon and welcome. You're watching Sports Prime, and we're going to bring very quickly to you what's all happening in the world of sports. Now, Prime Minister Narendra Modi congratulated Manu Bhaker, Rahi Sarnobat, Saurabh Chaudhary and Abhishek Verma for winning medals at the ISSF Shooting President's Cup that was held in Poland. India concluded the 2021 ISSF President's Cup campaign with 5 medals. 2 gold medals, 2 silver medals and 1 bronze medal was India's final tally at the prestigious shooting event. Congratulating the athletes, the Prime Minister tweeted, "Congratulations to Manu Bhaker, Sarnobat Rahi, S. Chaudhary and Abhishek for winning medals at the ISSF Shooting President's Cup in Poland. The people of India are proud of their stupendous performance and best wishes to these athletes for their future endeavours." Now, the Prime Minister also congratulated the Indian wrestling squad, where India bagged the highest number of medals with a total of 5 medals, including 1 silver and 4 bronze medals at the Senior Under-23 World Wrestling Championship. In a tweet, he said, "Congratulations to Shivani, Anju, Divya, Radhika and Nisha for winning medals at the Wrestling Championship in Belgrade. Their performance is special and will contribute to wrestling becoming even more popular across India." The Union Minister of Sports, Anurag Singh Thakur, also extended best wishes to the shooting squad, who bagged 5 medals at the ISSF Shooting President's Cup. In a tweet, he said, "Amazing achievement. Congratulations to S. Chaudhary, Abhishek, Real Manu Bhaker, Sarnobat Rahi on your victory at the ISSF Shooting President's Cup in Poland." The Union Sports Minister also extended best wishes to the wrestling squad, tweeting his best wishes. The minister said, "Well done, champs. Shivani, Anju, Divya, Radhika and Nisha, you have done us proud at the Wrestling Championships in Belgrade." Now, the first semi-final of the ICC T20 World Cup 2021 takes place today, where England takes on New Zealand at Abu Dhabi. England qualified for the semi-final after topping the Group 1 points table. England won 4 matches out of 5 and earned 8 points. New Zealand finished on the second spot with 8 points in Group 2. And in cricket, India's squad for the upcoming T20 match series against New Zealand has been announced. The All India Senior Selection Committee of the BCCI picked a 16-member squad for the T20 series against New Zealand. Rohit Sharma has been appointed as the new captain of the Indian team, and India is set to play 3 T20 matches starting from the 17th of November. The opening match will be played at Jaipur, while the other 2 matches will be played at Ranchi and Kolkata. The committee also picked the India A squad for the South Africa tour, scheduled to start from 23rd of November in Bloemfontein. The team will play 3 4-day matches during the tour. Well, that's all for now. From the world of sports, back to you, Amrit.
Well, thank you, Smriti, for that. Thank you. And before we move on, let me tell you breaking news coming in. The Delhi Declaration on Afghanistan about the regional dialogue has come out. Well, the Delhi Declaration says The National Security Advisors met and they reiterated strong support for peaceful, secure and a stable Afghanistan, emphasizing the respect for sovereignty, unity, territorial integrity and non-interference in internal affairs. They expressed deep concern of the suffering of the people of Afghanistan and condemned the terror attacks in Kabul, Kandahar and Kunduz. They emphasized that Afghan territory should not be used for sheltering, training, planning or financing any terrorist attacks and acts. They condemned in strongest terms terrorist activities and reaffirmed the strong commitment to combat terrorism in all forms and dismantling of terrorist infrastructure, countering radicalization and ensuring that Afghanistan should never become the safe haven for global terrorism. They've also spoken on terrorist financing. The Council called for, the NSAs called for a collective cooperation in dealing with the menace of radicalization and extremism, separatism, drug trafficking in the region. And they also said, they stressed on the necessity for forming an inclusive, open government that respects the will of Afghanistan and the will of all people of Afghanistan and has representation from all sections of society, including major ethno-political forces in the country and inclusion of all sections of society in the administrative and political structures. So this is what the Delhi Declaration of the Delhi Regional Security Dialogue on Afghanistan has come out with. And now it's time for our next segment, Life Prime, where we bring you stories from the world of art, cinema, fashion, science and innovation, stories that are bringing smiles, stories that are changing lives. The colorful festival of Chhath Puja is being celebrated across the nation. On this day, enthusiastic and excited Hindu devotees take a dip in the holy water and offer prayers to the sun god. We leave you with visuals of Chhath Puja celebrations. Enjoy your day. Namaskar.